I'm Kate Chaplinsky for the HAN Network, here with our election 2017 candidate conversations. And I'm joined right now by Kevin Moynihan, a Republican who is running for first selectman of New Canaan. Kevin, so happy to have you join us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And Kevin, just some of your background, you're currently on the town council.
Correct.
You've also worked for many years with the Republican Town Committee. You're a retired corporate attorney. You know, New Canaan had an incumbent Republican, so why did you think it was important to throw your hat in the ring and get in this election?
I didn't decide until April to challenge the incumbent, Rob Malazzi. It was mainly because of my concern about natural gas. We haven't had natural gas since natural gas came to town through Waveny Park in 1952, and New Canaan has never had natural gas. And I wasn't happy with the way Rob was handling the natural gas situation, so I decided I should make sure that we got natural gas, and that's one of the reasons I challenged him.
All right, so that inspired you to challenge him.
And now we're going to have natural gas coming to Farm Road in the schools next August.
And now another big issue in town lately has been cell service, in a way that you and your opponent kind of differ. There's been a lot of talk, where do we put cell towers? How do we cover these dead spots that we have? What's your take on that?
Well, for 5 years I've been following the cell service issue, and I am very frustrated that here, all these years later, we're really nowhere. In fact, we're about to lose. Aquarian owns those water towers, and since 2002, 30% of our cell service is covered by the antennas on that water tower. And Aquarian now wants to throw all the antennas off that water tower, including our public safety antennas, which is the only broadcasting location we have for public safety radio in New Canaan. So I don't want to see a cell tower in Waveny Park. I want to keep the antennas on that water tower, because it's an issue of just painting that water tower versus moving the antennas off. You mentioned gaps. It's not a question of gaps. Literally, the top half of our town has almost non-existent to very poor cell service. So we just have to, it's a public safety issue. These days, when our ambulances go out, our fire trucks, our police cars, they're not in communication except by radio. And these days, they need access to data to be able to protect our citizens. We also, you know, it's an issue of if people have an accident in parts of town, people have a heart attack in the yard. A lot of people don't have landlines anymore. You know, they depend upon their cell phones. So it's an issue of public safety today. We have to solve it.
And now another big issue for any municipal leader is going to be budgeting. Taxes important to voters. What's your approach to budgeting, working with the Board of Ed, et cetera, to come up with something that works for taxpayers?
Well, I attended the audit committee meeting last night, and you know, just yesterday or the day before, the governor announced a new budget proposal. And in this one, New Canaan, Westport, and Greenwich will be the only towns in the state out of 169 towns and cities to lose their, not only lose their ECS cost sharing for education. We get about we're down to about $350,000. They want us to contribute $800,000 toward the teachers' pension fund this year. So that's not in our budget. We've got real sober issues to deal with respect to our budget this upcoming year. We also have a revaluation coming up next year in 2018. A lot of our high-end property values are down, so we have a real challenge in the next several years with our budget.
Now, an interesting story our own New Canaan advertiser had yesterday. Just want your reaction to it. Freedom of information requests at Town Hall at a 10-year high. What's your take on that, or reaction to it?
It's a bit of a nuisance, especially when people are doing it more as harassment than for legitimate fact gathering. You know, I think the town is and should be open to citizens asking for whatever they want, but these days it's being used as a tactic to accomplish an objective, and I think that's we've had that several years ago. We can't continue to operate that. Darien, by the way, has the same issue. So Darien is looking to solve it by publicizing the people who are overactive with respect to FOIA requests. And you know, I think FOIA was meant to have open government. It should not be used as a harassment tool against government officials.
Would you think of any way to address that should you be elected first selectman? Would you follow in Darien's footsteps,
Darien's talking about publicizing on their website all requests so people know who the people are that are overactive with FOIA requests. And I think you have to address it somehow. It's become a burden on our town hall employees to deal with those requests.
Another big issue in town, commuter parking and finding more of it. What's your position on that?
That's one of my primary issues, one of the primary reasons I differentiated myself. The reason we have a competitive disadvantage now with Greenwich and other towns for commuters moving from New York City is we have a 10-minute more longer train ride from Manhattan, from Grand Central, because of the federally mandated slowdown of trains because of the accidents they've had. Plus we have a deficit of commuter parking of at least 300 and perhaps 500 spaces. We have a wait list for the lumberyard lot of 614. We have a wait list for 2 years for our least desirable commuter lot at Talmadge Hill. We have to, for 20 years we've studied, we've paid for studies on parking. We've always said deck the lumberyard, and the decking the lumberyard would go a long way to solving what is really an economic issue for us today. Our home values are suffering because new residents are choosing not to move to New Canaan. It's easier to go to Greenwich where you can get parking more conveniently. The train ride is less, and it's a competitive disadvantage for us. So my plan is to deck the lumberyard. We can do it with commuter fees paying the cost, bonding it through, and without having taxpayers pay for it.
Now, Kevin, you're a very active Republican, and you've helped some other Republicans on their campaigns, including Mitt Romney. You were on President-elect Donald Trump's Finance Committee. Any plans to continue working with the Trump administration now or in the future?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm working with the Trump administration. I think...
Sorry, President-elect, right.
I think I've been a Republican since I moved to New Canaan 36 years ago. I grew up as a Democrat.
Oh, interesting.
I know the difference, and I've been active on the federal level with Senate candidates and other candidates. I was very active with the Mitt Romney fundraising effort. I'm a Republican. I like, on the national and state level, I'm very concerned about having Republican thinking. At the local level, we don't really have commuter parking issues that are Republican or Democrat or self-service issue, so it's not really a relevant issue on the local level.
Right. And now, other than the issues we've discussed, what's something that you want to address if elected?
Well, we've covered most of them. I would mention, since I've been on the town council, one of the things I'm most proud of, I have the Waveny Park Conservancy hat on. We're sitting here at Waveny Park, which is
beautiful
300-acre facility.
Yeah.
Almost half as big as Central Park. Most people don't realize that.
Wow.
And 3 years ago, I had the idea of creating a conservancy like the Central Park Conservancy. I recruited Bob Siller to run it, and we now have almost $500,000 of investment with private dollars. Over beyond the mansion here, there's a area called the Cornfields, which is a 30-acre piece of property. It's going to be a beautiful new meadow. We have new trails because of the Waveny Conservancy, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of, having been on the town council. And I look to further the efforts to improve Waveny Park. It's a beautiful asset.
It really is,
really
yeah.
is
and we've spoken to members of the Conservancy. It's a great group. They're doing some great work there.
I would also mention, we have the athletic fields, which we just had an unfortunate cost overrun on.
Yes.
And that's an example of transparency in government. I mean, it was really appalling that at the end of June we realized we had an overrun of 20%, and that was not communicated to our town council, to our board of finance. And I talked about transparency in the caucus race. Transparency means you have to be open with information. You have to be candid, and I would plan to be a candid and open first selectman.
All right, Kevin Moynihan, a Republican running for first selectman of New Canaan. Kevin, thanks again for joining us and talking today.
Thank you.
All right, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're going to wrap things up here on this candidate conversation. We'll see you next time.